Evening, Moyo. How are you?
Hey, Janine, wonderful work as Obi, right?
Sorry?
The work behind you, that's Obi in Wewe.
No, this is Uche Jolchima.
That is true, Uche. Beautiful work, really
Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful
yeah.
work. Yeah, I guess he was doing that when he was in Denver.
Yeah, he had an exhibition in Denver, and I inherited the works that weren't sold in that exhibition, so it worked out quite nicely.
Lucky
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Very, very interesting work, I must say. But
yeah.
does it
It's
rub
perfect.
on your fingers, or has it found a way to kind of vanish the surface?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. I didn't hear the first part.
Did he find a way to vanish the surface of the? Is it the?
No, it's chunks of charcoal. And if you try to move it, that charcoal will fall off sometimes. But it's really easy
It
to
will
add.
rub on you.
Mhm. So it has a real textual quality to it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Always participating with the torture.
Mhm.
That well,
Hi, Janine. Ẹlẹ́kọ̀
Hi.
ọ̀rọ̀ lẹ́.
lọ jókòó ara ẹ jẹ́.
Ẹ kọ́lẹ̀ sà.
Ah, báwo ni ọdún?
Àṣeyàn kan tẹ̀ wá bí tọ́gbọ́ Yorùbá.
Ọdún ni.
Ọdún re náà lámọ̀ rí. You're most welcome.
Is this
Good
agbada?
evening.
What is this half agbada that you are wearing now? If you want to wear agbada, wear agbada. Why half agbada?
Ẹ̀sìkí
Esiki,
olóko rẹ̀. Ẹ̀sìkí.
esiki, sir.
Ẹ̀sìkí mi sà.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Well, I'm in this village in Ghana.
Where you eat boiled yam and cocoyam leaves.
Today, I ate.
What do you drink on top of that?
But
You should ask them to give you either apetashi or palm wine.
I have both. As a
You
matter
have
of fact, one of the people I'm working with, her husband makes akpeteshi, and of course,
I'm sorry
it
for
comes from
you.
palm wine.
I'm sorry for you.
I'm sorry for myself. I get very fresh palm wine
Oh, wow.
every day.
Moyo, why is my name? Excuse me. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Moyo, why is your name under my picture?
My name is not there.
No, my name is not there.
Oh, wow.
Your name
Look
is
at
here.
Moyo's painting behind
I
Frida.
know. I
Fantastic.
know. I can't
Did you
believe.
see that?
Okay.
Circle scope,
Oh, good. How are you?
1989.
Steven.
Wow. Wow.
Good afternoon, sir.
Fantastic. It goes back memory lane.
I know.
All right. I
How
don't
are
know
you?
if everyone is here on. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this fascinating event where we discuss, this unique book with the author, Moyo Okediji, who has provided us, a fascinating Nollywood thriller, an adventurous travel log around Nigeria, a fascinating entrepreneurial, guidebook, an incisive template into the artistic practice of a unique practitioner of honor, and a surrealist speak, if you will, into the subconscious of Tola Wewe. But perhaps the most fascinating of all for me is that it provides us a unique account of, the stylistic traits of Tola Wewe's artistic sensibility. But by far the most important of all is that it shows us his thematic preoccupation. I don't know which angle any of you want to approach this. Unfortunately, I'm constrained as the chair. I cannot talk in any way about some of these items that I've identified, but I will give each of you just about 12 minutes to make your presentation, and thereafter we can have a dialogue with the author. So should I take the liberty of just, pouncing on anyone to start? Or perhaps I should just leave it. Okay, Odun wants to start. All right, you can set the ball rolling. You have 12 minutes. I'm already timing you. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, I'm just awed to be in this presence of everyone here. I'm continually learning from all of you, particularly. Forgive me, I will take off the video so the audio stops cracking up here, so you can hear me better. All right. I'll just speak, and to make it fast, I will not say any of the quotes that I'm dealing with. One of the central concepts of metamodernism is this oscillation. This refers to the movement between different positions, ideas, and emotions. It recognizes and acknowledges that reality is multifaceted and often contradictory. It seeks to embrace this complexity rather than attempting to resolve it. And in this book, we're invited to this captivating journey that transcends the boundaries of time, space, and delving into more of the enchanting world of Yoruba culture. And sorry, sir, I will continue to call you the author. The author blends, Yoruba worldview poetics into this, for lack of a better word, for me, it was a little mesmerizing tapestry of art and philosophy. Through the artist's sight, that is Tola Wewe, and through the author's extrapolation, we make connections with his camaraderie with the artist, and his interaction with the artist, and his interpretation of the work. His poetic language is rather beautiful. The mastery lies in his ability to seamlessly integrate, this Yoruba worldview with the contemporary notions of metamodernism. His dissection of the artist and his work are actually a profound exploration of the human condition. It invites us to reflect on our own existence and the transformative power of cultural ingenuity. His writing is imbued in a vulnerable sensibility that unravels the intricate relationship between culture, identity, the timeless pursuit of artistic expressions in his interpretations. And it creates this kaleidoscopic view of how the artist runs his work, which is very different from how you probably would see it if you came at it from one single worldview. In his vivid descriptions of alternate dimensions, celestial encounters, ethereal landscapes, vivid narrations of experiences, the prose is very evocative. I keep juggling words, through the book. I've gone through it twice now, sir. The world's like the intangible, delineated, otherworldly. The ability to intertwine historical anecdotes and Yoruba proverbs, mystical rites, with the narrative in layers of meaning and depth in the interpretation creates this holistic approach that elevates the book beyond just the story. It's not just a story. It transforms it into a meditation on the essence of being, dealing with hard-hitting issues like transmitted and experienced trauma, like what he does with the idea of the war and violence, and even in that he delves even deeper, touching issues like innateness, self-awareness, intuitive knowledge, memory of the body, and memory of the fetus, and dream and transcendent. You know, it's rather broad. Every time I mention this, I pull something from the book, but I'm jumping as I go. Well, I experienced hard-hitting phrases such as the pains of peace, which launches, a new space for reflection and reason, you know, to revisit archives, to relook at how history's been written, even outside of the cultural context and in the Nigerian history in itself. His words become this visual abstractions to the text, and they come from this state of liminality and the need I feel, well, in reading it, I feel that this need of refuge or sanctuary in expression that is being attended to for me. Trauma in this context is also connected to the huge impact of the, here I write, the mother phenomena, for lack of a better way to express that. But this is not just in loss, but in the ideals of love and the lens on the female as an epitome or iconography of love. You know, this extends in, you know, his explaining the artist's work into revisiting concepts of the erotic as heroic. He poses alternate interpretations of the erotic nude female form, and you know, in so doing, challenges you know, Western worldview. In, you know, maybe talking about this proverbial male gaze, misogyny, and you know, all the other things that he says, rampage of patriarchy, as an alien infusion into something that, you know, isn't original to the space that he's speaking from. So here the erotic is repurposed versus the subject of war and violence, weighing of the erotic against the therapy of the erotic in its heroic stance. He uses this apt term of the urgent metaphor in describing the artist revisiting this nude body. And I mean, the interpretations for that also for me became endless, particularly in my interests for SHGBV. He touches on the theories of not knowing and pinning the artist's mind in pointing out articulations of expressions, particularly that part where he quotes the artist saying, you know, when he was asked, what do you want to think? And he says, I don't know. And I mean, it's something that resonates a lot because of the lack of understanding where work or the memory of the body comes from. This theory, he's touching on not knowing, it brings this new, you know, for me, a new face to this general talk about rethinking decoloniality. As a space of relearning as new knowledge, because for me, this relearning is new knowledge. It's just something that I have imbibed out genetically. So we get to see this in different extrapolations of the artist work. Particularly, I found the explanation of the Agigo. I don't know if I said that right, but, and you know, and the Abigo bird and those tenants. It was very, very enlightening for me. He poses this question. Well, I'm posing the question from what he said. He poses this question that why can't the indigenous be contemporary? What is so untranslatable or so uncultivatable about it? Reminded me about the discussion that I had with my students about the affair that comes before Gelede, and I was comparing it to the contemporary Solosoke, you know, and this term of see something, say something, and we all didn't think of it that way before. I also found very interesting that
sorry, I don't mean to be rude, not to cut you. You have just about 2 minutes to wrap up. Thank you.
All right. This is okay. Let me say this. I also found interesting how we delved into the spirituality of the creative process, you know, in relation to indigenous cosmological context, that space. He wades into the place for divining in the creative process and the performativity of it. This is something that I think that can be unpacked over and over again, which is great, maybe because I lean into performance and, you know, this idea of metaphysics in it, and how it continues to come back to the concept of dreams, and not just dreams, but translation in reality. I'm now running to, but I came back to something that I discussed with Moses Serubiri about something that Prof said in 2014. When he was talking about unlearning, dismembering, remembering. I don't know if you remember, sir, but you were talking about this thing about inadequate language and how language is so imperative in so many different contexts, and how the educational system that we are groomed with thwarts that, and, you know, causes this, how to say, need for repair. That has created this, you know, relational divide between our cultural experience and our physical environment, or the environment that we navigate. I thought that was really, really interesting. I have so much more to say, but I think I'm running out of time.
Thank you.
Right.
So let's move on to the next presenter. I wonder if Dr. Folaranmi is ready to go. Steve, the stage is yours.
He just disappeared actually from the panels.
No, it looks as if he's still there. Oh, now he's disappeared.
Yeah.
All right. Can you?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
You think I would be more accustomed to the Zoom sessions and know to turn my mute button off at the right time.
Excellent.
Yeah. At any rate, I'd like to begin by thanking the LEGO Studies Association for offering this platform. I am overjoyed to be invited to join in the celebration of this birth of this beautiful book. I had the privilege of being a fly on the wall in the early stages, 2011, 2012. And it's wonderful to see it to fruition. This is a book that joins the growing corpus of monographs on contemporary Nigerian and Nigerian-based artists. In 2009, of course, Sylvester Becci published his seminal monograph, Beninwanwu, The Making of a Modernist. And since that time, we've seen a proliferation of books dedicated to contemporary Nigerian and Nigerian-based artists. Yusuf Quilo, Adue Chukwu, Elanatsui, the list goes on. And these books have helped to chart the history of contemporary art in Nigeria. They have helped to broaden, to deepen, to enrich understanding of that history. We can see them, a public example is introducing the details to works painted with broad strokes. Okediji.'s monograph on Tola Wewe is a welcome addition to the corpus of monographs that have emerged in recent years. Wewe is an artist who needs no introduction in Nigeria, an artist with a rich history who rose to prominence in the context of the 1990s when Nigeria was under Sani Abacha's political military regime. And he's an artist that at that time offered a refreshing alternative. This is something that Okediji addresses in his book, to the natural paintings dedicated to market women and bata drummers common in the Lagos galleries at that time. These were works that Okediji eloquently conveys incorporated maybe perhaps referenced Yoruba aesthetics and philosophies as a way to rethink the political climate in Nigeria, as well as broader perhaps issues surrounding human complexity. These are Moyo Okediji described these works as metamodern visions. Perhaps we could also think about these works as drawing from and Dube's concept of absolute discourse as works that in which Western epistemological codes fade, works that operate outside of the colonial hegemony. And yet, as Okediji also reveals in his book, Wewe's works have often, and I'm quoting here, drawn criticism from those who disregard his strategy of questioning the colonial canons, critics who attempt to impose those colonizing capitals on his creative inquiries. And this is something that, of course, is not specific to treatments of Wewe's works. We have seen improvements within art history and criticism since the 1990s with the decolonial turn. But I think it's fair to say that the field retains the vestiges of colonialism. Art critics worldwide continue to treat art criticism or examine artworks through a singular lens. Roland de Biodun articulates this well when he says that art scholars rarely venture outside of the dominant Western paradigm, even when they analyze works from non-Western cultures. And there's plenty of contemporary artists who have been responding to this issue in their practice. I'm reminded, for example, of Simone Lee's response to criticisms of the 2019 Whitney Biennial in which her works were featured. It was frequently said that the works weren't in that particular edition of the Whitney Biennial were not radical enough. And she asks her critics, asks the scholars who are engaging with her work, anybody who's engaging her work, to come with the knowledge to respond to the issues of her work. She recognizes that it's only through engaging with relevant discourse that you can come to understand the complexity of these works. I had an MFA student who in her critique asked us to review literature in preparation of her critique. So this is becoming more standard. Moyo Okediji, I think, in this book helps to helps to complement these compositions, these works that are painted with these broad brush strokes, helps to add in the details with the work. He comes, of course, to this project armed with a deep and extensive knowledge of Nigerian politics, knowledge of global geopolitics and the intersections between the two. He comes with a rigorous understanding of decolonial theory and its application, along with a deep understanding of Yoruba aesthetics. And I think with this knowledge and as a result of this these decades of friendship and conversation with Tola Wewe, he in this publication is able to expand our understanding of Nigerian art, as well as global contemporary art. I think it's fair to say that global contemporary art continues, especially if we're talking about artists who came to light or came to prominence in the 1990s, to focus on those working in historic art centers in the global north at the expense of artists working in Nigeria as well as elsewhere and in Africa. This is a rich contribution to those conversations. So thank you, Moyo, for that.
Thank you so much, Janine. Let's roll along, and Frida, the stage is yours while we're waiting for Stephen Folaromi. He just emailed me that he had a power outage, so maybe he's trying to sort that out. But let's go on to you, Frida.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon to our audience in Lagos and around the world on Zoom, to the distinguished conference organizers, the seventh annual Lagos Studies Association Conference, to Dr. Moyo Okediji, author of Metamodern Vision of Tola Wewe, distinguished artist, Mr. Tola Wewe, and distinguished panelists. I'm so honored to be here to join you all from Madison, Wisconsin. Metamodern Vision of Tola Wewe is a book or a companion catalog to a solo exhibition of paintings and ceramics by Tola Wewe, authored and curated by Moyo Okediji. Okediji astutely divides the project into 8 categorical themes: the arrival, Iya mother, lover, power, related to womanhood, the years of war and love, particularly references to Ile Ife, the city of Modakake problems. Home is where the art is, the diviners and the painter, the ceramic bodies of clay, abstraction between silence and the noise of painting. What I found particularly interesting, I'm going to stop a minute, was the fact that Tola Wewe took his painting outside and the animals were actually looking at the painting. That was something that was really surprising to me. So abstractions between silence and the noise of painting. And departures, Nigeria, departure and return, plus biographical notes and gallery. Okediji opens a lens onto Tola Wewe's life, particularly since his student period began in 1979, when he arrived at the University of Ife, later Obafemi Awolowo University, where Okediji was a young teacher. Okediji took a special interest in Wewe's work. After Wewe graduated in '83, according to Okediji, say Moyo. According to Moyo Okediji, he entered the circle of artists who had graduated within decades. They were young, serious, passionate, driven to rethink art, and not satisfied with their colonial education, nor with art, nor life around them. They were hungry for something different. However, they were fortunate to have had faculty that inspired them: Dr. Babatunde Lawal, Dr. Roland Abiodun, Dr. Erin Wamuji. Okediji notes that toward the end of the 90s, 4 young artists and I came together and formed a group that we named ONA, in an attempt to plot a new direction. They utilize the concept of ONA in their artistic practices, what Okediji describes as a creative energy that started eons ago, ages before the transatlantic slave trade began in the 15th century. ONA is a concentration of artistic energies for aesthetic healing, a search for clarity in the midst of chaos, a devotion to structure and the engulfment of calamity. It is a Yoruba word for design, decoration, aesthetics, and moreover, it is a term that encompasses all forms of creativity and artistic production, including visual, literary, musical, performance. Tola Wewe in ONA, a revolutionary art movement in Nigeria in 1990, in a 1990 Metamodern proceedings of the International Conference of Yoruba Art at Obafemi Awolowo University after Okediji, notes specifically that ONA artists' motifs, designs, and embellishments are inspired by ONA decorations from calabash carvings, tattoos, faciology, carvings, paintings, textiles, beading, and leatherworks. Thank you for giving me that years ago, Janine. Such elements are evident in Wewe's composition throughout the book. Whether geometric abstractions or stylized figurations, Wewe's compositions imaginatively imbue designs and motifs that are aesthetically compelling. For example, in the gallery section of the book, an acrylic painting on canvas, Daughters of Indigo Dyers, painted in 2005, consists of variegated shapes that have a mosaic character of a mural and simultaneously that of an opaque stained glass. Its cool monochromatic blue geometric designs, accentuated with a few red-hot dots and shapes, nearly conceal the female figures that rhythmically move beneath the stylized face at the top center of the canvas. That face appears both human and deity, much like the motif of Eshu on an Ife divination tray. The canvas resonates with a triadic color scheme of hot, warm, and cool temperatures. Interestingly, Okediji states that Wewe has a striking use of divination, of Ife divination devices before and after he makes art. That is evident in Wewe's consistent turning to divination for advice as an important aspect of life. Speaking about himself, Wewe asserts, as an artist, I am a new town crier. I project the voice of the people to the world in colorful aesthetic ways. My voice is not just personal. I speak for myself, my people, and my era. Collectors and museums may agree, for as Okediji observes, Wewe became the #1 artist to collect in Lagos. In fact, he became, for many collectors in Lagos, a transformative figure who changed the visual cultural vocabulary of the art metropolis at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. With deep thought about Wewe's life and work, and given their interaction as professional artists and friends over decades, Moyo locates Wewe's work in a discourse of metamodernism, avoiding the language of postmodern or post-postmodern or post-colonial. It is an inventive approach to theorizing language that best meets the needs of the scholar who skirts the limits of conventional art historical analysis and methods, particularly the limits of African art studies. Metamodernism incorporates all forms of art aesthetic camps and fragmentation present in African art studies, Okediji explains. It bridges transitions, innovations, inventions in aesthetic art from primitivisms to sensiotics and beyond these paradigms. More precisely, he adds, as a working definition, metamodernism is an intuitive modification of modalities and tools of modernity beyond its extinct horizons, walls, organs, walls, landscapes, engineering, time, space, future, information, and more. The concept not only operates outside of conventional categories and binaries that are continuously debated, such as traditional, colonial, post-colonial, and so on. It avoids intrusive totalizing constructs. Its languages and methods enact concepts of African artistry as they intervene in and transcend such conventional disciplinary language and categorical separations in African art studies. Okediji's thought takes into account Abiodun's admonition to beware of externally imposed paradigms. In his own experiences over 2 decades earlier at the Denver Art Museum, Okediji continued his search for methods of art historical inclusivity. He drew on Abiodun's aesthetics, theories of Iwa, and his thought about the value of sight and sound and methods of analysis as they are included in elements of soul. Rules sensorial mathematics, a cluster of ideas and exploratory techniques developed for the human perception in general, and of art in particular, elucidates its tools, ideas, and exploratory techniques that draw on sensorial human perceptions and the dynamic intersection of the mind and body in the critical investigation of African art. Okediji believed art divisions and binaries by leveraging the polarities through what he calls frames of fusion rather than frames of fission. In other words, the concept proposes to offer inclusive methods for investigating the diversified corpus of African art, not in separate categories, but with an art historical inclusivity that can aptly examine works of art in diversified mediums across language, visual form, performance, and diversified subjects with interpretations and analysis that do justice to the subjects using their own character in their own terms or on their own terms. Considering the analyses in Metamodern vision of Tola Wewe, Okediji draws on the expressional data of forms and connects those forms to motifs, images, allegories, ritual, historical conditions, and symbolical values of specific time and place that one finds in the approaches of Panofsky's iconology. It would be interesting to further consider the methodological interpenetration of iconology and metamodernism. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hai. Let's go on to the next discussing today, and that's Dr. Folaranmi. I think he's back, he's joined us. Steve.
Yes,
you
I'm
have
here.
the stage now. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think as we were
12 minutes.
Yeah, okay. As we were going on, there was a power outage. I mean, I knew, but my system then decided to do something. Perhaps it was kidnapped by Sergeant and his people and the others. But it's quite an interesting read for me, and quite also interesting because over the years, we've looked at the works of people like Tola Wewe, Okediji himself, Bolaji Campbell, and the others who Okediji has mentioned in this book, talking about Tola Wewe. I think the book, it smells together in sublime terms, reality and mythology, poetry, performance, art and religion, drama, spirituality, which is perfectly woven by Moyo Okediji in this work. One thing that quite strikes me is that who else can better write about Tola Wewe in this present discourse than Moyo Okediji? First, because I mean, for many years, Moyo Okediji had looked at Tola Wewe while Tola Wewe was also a student in Ife. So I think he has that first-hand information of several years to be able to write in such beautiful words, Tola Wewe's words. And when you begin to read the work, even without looking at the images, you begin to have some sense of either nightmares or dreams as has been rendered on the canvases, that beautiful canvases that Tola Wewe himself puts there. You begin to see colors and warmth and calmness, even in the words that Okediji has used in describing many of the works that Tola Wewe have produced in this work. But perhaps also very striking for me in this work is the methodological approach, which has been mentioned a while ago. And you see that intersection between what Africanist scholars like Roland Abiodun, Babatunde Lawal, Droal have written about over the years, what engenders and looks at African arts from the perspective of the indigenous people from Africa and how they view those works, not particularly using methodological approaches that are being used to look at other works of art from the West. So that's what's particularly striking in this work. One of the other striking things that I've seen that Moyo Okediji has looked at, which Tola Wewe has used in his creation of his work, is the use of the Ifa oracle, which has also been mentioned quite well by Roland Abiodun as a methodological approach in trying to look at the African works of art, language, poetry. And as Professor Campbell mentioned earlier on, unfortunately, he won't be able to speak about that. I begin to think about what Okediji has written here as Nollywood. And I'm asking myself, there are quite a number of stories that he started and then you weaves it around and you're wondering when the part 2 of that Nollywood film is going to come back. Perhaps we'll wait for that in the sequel to perhaps returning of Tola Wewe or Okediji himself as we have returning of our mother. There are also concepts like the twinning, Ibeji, which are reflected in the works of Tola Wewe that have been shown either in the paintings or in the few ceramic pieces that have been shown in this work, which in a way, Okediji mentioned the work of Kossuth, which says art is making meaning. It talks about metamodernize, the deathlessness of that differentiates Wewe's work from that of Kossuth. And so you see Wewe playing these 20 things all over with his work, delving between so many spheres of the life of what he's been working on. And perhaps one of the other striking things that I looked at is when you see Okediji writing about Wewe, down through the works, you see Wewe, we call him Wewe, Tiwi, Abami, African Picasso, and Inwi. And in certain instances, I feel that at certain point in time, Wewe changes himself like a chameleon, putting on the garb of whether it was Inwi or Abami or the real Wewe that we know. And he reflects that on this canvas. And in reading through Okediji, you see he has literally captured all those essence of what Wewe has been trying to do over the years on the canvas of his work. Talking about Diola and Delilah and the power of the women, the returning of our mothers. And one aspect that's quite interesting for me is where we're translating issues that are quite negative. For instance, the returning of our mothers. I mean, when the mother was eventually found, Wewe did not show us issues with respect to either blood or so on, but he had put the mother on a horse, the triumphant entry of the mother, thinking about the power of the mother and the strength and what the Babalawo will say and his experiences with nightmares and dreams and so on and so forth. So it's quite an interesting read for me. I'm still battling and my head is still roaming all over and over and over what Okediji has put in for us here. I have a few questions, for instance. I mean, the stories we told about Sergeant and Gideon and so on and so forth. I mean, I was beginning to ask, did you, in the last part, did you interview them? And then I realized, could it be the nightmares that Tola Wewe was having? And so put it so beautifully. I mean, somebody writing a script, as if Achebe is writing a script here, or Wale Soyinka is writing a script here for a stage play. In essence, putting all this together with Tola Wewe's work, and so it looks to me like the stage is set for not just the sound, the silence, the music, the beating of the bata drums, and so on and so forth, that Okediji has succinctly put beautifully for us in very sublime words. And we can continue to engage with several aspects of the bodies of work that Wewe have produced and Okediji has put together for us. I think I'll leave it at that with what to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Best way for me to engage with all this presentation is to remind myself of what Fakeye was used to say anytime anyone wanted to discuss, his art. That so the ball is now in your court, Professor Okediji, to respond to the discussants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for honoring me with this amazing discussion of the book on Tola Wewe. I am overwhelmed by your insights, your willingness to spend time to look at the writing and to see some of the things that you have highlighted. I really feel humbled by the analysis that you have provided. And I must start by thanking Professor Frida Hai Tesfa-Georgis, who has been the mother for most of us here academically. Most of us who are on this panel, I can speak on their behalf in terms of the cooking that Professor Tesfa-Georgis has done on all of us. I remember when I first got to Madison, Wisconsin, I more or less became a child in a new culture. When you go into another culture, however old you might be, you become a child again. And I could have gotten lost, even totally aborted guidance. And those speaking Tesfa-Georgis. So I bow in panel. Professor Campbell, I have been interacting with for decades, as well as really a cheating to bring all of them here to talk about my work, but I am quite honored that I am having this interaction with all of them. The work was inspired as Janine Sitzma says. It started because I felt there was a need to begin developing monographs. Very well on African art, even though purchasing actually that art has perhaps it's only in African art that we have traditional. I don't know of traditional American European art. I don't know of traditional Asian art. But it seems as if in the field of African art, to impose these linguistics on the visual culture that they would hesitate to impose of license granted, would you say, external scholars looking at African art to impose certain things on this material that more or less reduces from the opportunities that are extended to others in everywhere else all over the world by this division between traditional and contemporary. So many issues that transcend aesthetics come into play, issues that are essentially political and issues that have contributed to the lack of rigorous discussion of African art. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to write about Tola Wewe in a way that enables me to break free of these impositions. And I felt able to do it also because I am quite familiar with Tola Wewe, and I know that he would not impose those limitations on me. He's an art historian himself. He studied art history as well as visual art. And beyond that, he has, to a large extent, freed himself of the traditional ways of thinking about art. So I feel quite free to discuss his work as loosely as I wanted. But more than anything else is my need to write in a way that is not impinged by Western publishing houses. Western publishing houses have agendas that many of us don't seem to fully understand. And those agendas are not always healthy in terms of the discussion of African art. Is not transparent. And I think there is a need for us in the South, for people who are engaging Southern cultures, Southern, as they say, cultures, encourage a publishing that is free of the Northern impositions, because the Northern impositions go through the peer reviews that more or less just compels you to write in a particular way, compels you to discuss only certain things, and would not writing that I'm doing. And it's one of the reasons I approached the Institute of Cultural Studies at the Obafemi Awolowo University to consider publishing this book so that I would not be imposed upon by those who want to hear only certain things written in a certain way. And having said that, I'll just keep quiet for
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Okediji. Let's open it up to our panelists. I believe a lot of them, have a lot of questions, agitating the mind. Frida, would you want to set the ball rolling? Do you have any specific questions or comments? Yeah, you're still muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, my husband was making coffee. I had to, sorry. Oh, thank you. I was saying that I have a number, but I'm just going to start with one. When I was reading, I mean, the paintings are just so beautiful. And especially there's the one, I can't remember the name, but it's toward the end where the mother is coming in a boat, a canoe. That is just so fantastic. Yeah. There's so much power in that. It's so much activation, animation, and yet it's still, and all the movement around her. It's just so beautiful. Well, anyway, that is so different. It's mother. It's mother. It's not lover. It's mother. But then Audre Lorde's poem, you used Audre Lorde's poem, and this whole thing about love. I don't remember seeing anything about GLBT in there in your discussion. And so that may be something to think about, that it is love, but and there's sort of a general love, but then she specifically loves women, even though she was married and had a child before. But so I think that becomes a part of the narrative. And also with it, I hadn't read that poem in a long time, so I had to go back and read it. And as I did, I saw so much pain, in addition to the love, the GLBT life, so much pain that takes us into colorism. Now, that may be more of an American thing, but I think it's all over the world. The colorism, that she's the darker of the two sisters who were cruel to her. So you brought out that element of cruelty. But I don't remember seeing a colorism or that idea. So that may be something that we can think about too. And maybe we're much more conscious of it here in America because it's a big problem, even within families. And she's addressing that, that element there. So that was one thing I wanted to think about. And I was just wondering what you thought about that, Moyo.
Well, you introduced Audre Lorde to me. I didn't know. And I appreciate your highlighting her. And when I came to the United States, I was what they now call homophobic. I had no idea about LGBTQ. And I found it almost funny that everybody wasn't like me. But as time went on, under your guidance and reading many other books, in writing Tola Wewe's book, however, I wasn't thinking of her in terms of LGBTQ. I was thinking of her in a universal way. I think the term LGBTQ actually tends to isolate these people rather than include them. And if nobody mentioned that Audre Lorde was LGBTQ and I was reading a poem, I would still enjoy it. I would still find it quite She's an incredible writer. And that was essentially what I was tapping into. This beautiful, beautiful poet who is addressing issues of being a woman and locating herself in a kind of womanhood that I think is open to everybody all over the world.
Could you, Moyo, talk a little bit more about, how you were able to create this atmosphere of the surreal? Was Tola Wewe just, a ready model, of the complexity of Yoruba surrealistic, universe? How were you able to integrate that into the monograph?
Well, surrealism is a highly loaded word, in the sense that we, as a people, we are surrealists in everyday life. I'm just using the word because you're using it. I would not really use it. Our way of life moves in dimensions that are not limited. If we, for instance, just the name of a person opens up. My name, Okediji, is totally surrealistic. It includes Oke, which is a hill, but the hill moves into the dimension of Eshu. And Eshu then brings in all kinds of invocations. Mm-hmm. So how do I then not take advantage of that way of thinking that is not, when this is someone is Taiwo, it just blows the lid open in terms of the way the West thinks about reality. Because Taye is this character who has sent, Kainde is this character who has sent Taye on a journey to find out about the world. So how does one not be surrealistic in quote? So what the West calls surrealism is just the way we think ordinarily. Mm-hmm. And that's what I benefited from.
Okay, thank you. Odon, do you have follow-up questions?
Thank you so much, sir. So sorry, I have questions.
Okay, I mean, if you don't have any questions, that's fine.
I have questions,
I was hoping,
I have questions. They just might be too many. For the first one that I have to ask is concerning this thing about not knowing. And it's something that hits from the very first page, that page where you said, we were all young in those days, we were quite serious, and we did not like that we were doing, something like that, and we didn't know what was right, but we just knew that this wasn't what we wanted. And it was really strange how that could have been me right now in my, because I also practice and in connecting with other people that I try to reach in this context. This thing of the I'm this thing about how I've come to learn, how I was taught, or the system that I've grown in, and how it's so very different from what it is that I'm interested in doing. And every time that I try to do that, it takes me back into learning. It takes me back into learning what it is that I'm trying to understand for instance, recently I've been trying to understand something about the number 9 and Yoruba language, which I found very interesting. And this thing, because it made me start looking into theories of not knowing and how we're taught and how we use the knowledge that we've gotten so far. I know that people talk about this idea of unlearning the things that we know, or hybridizing it with the new knowledge that we've learned. But then you mentioned this thing where you said that Tola Wewe himself said, I don't know, and how it comes in when he's making the work. It's not that he doesn't know. He's full of all the knowing. He just can't say it to you. And I just felt if you could elaborate a little more on that. That's my first question. The second question was about this thing you said about Janine that first mentioned that something about discourse and what relevant discourse is and how this plays out in the information that is out there. Because a lot of times when I'm looking for things that I will really get from, I have to find journals that were written here, and they're not easy to come by. They're not online like that, and that is where the knowledge base that I'm looking for is. So what you mentioned about this thing about publishing spaces and having a new space to do that, but then I mean it's a recurring question about what is relevant discourse. What is relevant discourse? I've read this book twice. I'm already asking others to read it that are asking questions like me, and spaces to discuss them would be places like LSA, places like ACASA, places not on a wider space, but there are so many more people that even from different cultures that want to read it in this context. So it really does beg the question about what is relevant discourse in which spaces, and how does that play out. The last was what Professor Tesfa, sorry, I'm sure I didn't pronounce
hi,
that right.
H-I-G-A, hi, is my maiden name. So
all right,
okay.
So she went back to something you mentioned, because I was going into what you said, the things you said about the performativity of the artistic process. Okay, maybe because I've been following your studio work so much, so and all the other things that Professor Okediji has been doing, so I can understand that, particularly in my constantly seeing performance in everything that is, the creative practice now. The dream that you talked about, that about the crossroads that Professor Wewe was talking about, and then it was in the interpretation that issue came into the discussion, and maybe because I finally had read some little bit about, I know I'm not versed enough, but I read a lot about that issue and the context and how it played out and how it is in that painting. If I saw the painting alone and I read the title, Issue at the Crossroads, I would see it very differently from how you interpreted it as a dream. And that is from a limited space of understanding. And this is from someone that is trying to learn. So I'm wondering how for here in we have a certain curriculum that we run with our students, and they run in a certain way. And I keep interjecting things like this into the content. Sometimes I get flack for it. Sometimes I go under the radar. but then I begin to wonder when will this, the change that's happened in Ife, when does it spread everywhere? When does it, impact in all spaces? I'm not against hybridizing. I'm all for the idea of the post-Africanist, but it's just like when you watch Chinese documentaries, you're almost in awe of how knowledgeable they insist their culture should be to other people, not just people from their community. I know that museums do that. I know that museums are charged to do that. But then my question is, how does this work out? I know that I will take some years to get to where you are right now, understanding these things. But then how does that help someone like me now, right now?
Okay, let's give Professor Okediji the opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your questions. I don't know where to begin to answer them, but I would just begin by saying that I really, really like your work, your installations. The more I look at your installations, the more I realize that we have a lot of work to do as art historians, as critics, because I don't even know how many people have seen your work. I think the installations that you make actually show more of that sense of I don't know than I could ever even begin to address. I hope we will have more graduate students of African art who will be able to interrogate artists like you. And I hope to have a student coming in this year that I have already asked to go and talk to you about your work when she hasn't even started yet. But I think she'll be in a good position to address your work. But the issue of some of the issues that you raise, I think also can be answered in terms of, I don't know. I don't know in the sense that nobody really knows anything. All we do is we think about things. And when we think about them, we articulate them, it seems as if we know about them. But the Yoruba way of using proverbs to solve things do not solve things at all. They only complicate things. They only get you into a situation of asking more questions and of paying attention. And I think this is more what I need to do than really explain anything. There's no explanation I'm trying to make in that book. I cannot explain Tola Wewe. Nobody can explain Tola Wewe. Tola Wewe himself will tell you that he doesn't know what he's doing. So how could I know what Tola Wewe is doing? So I would say the sense of the unknowable is actually the space of art and creativity. You can't know art. You can only present it to others.
All right, thank you so much. Fascinating, dimension of engaging with the mystique of Tola Wewe. Let's move on to Stephen Folaranmi. Maybe he also has one or two questions, and then we can close it with Janine's reaction. But first, let's go to Steve.
Yeah, okay. Before my question, just wanted to say that, while we were talking, Odun was mentioning issues with language and trying to know and things like that. I mean, just a little story. I remember when I was writing my undergraduate, when I thought I had finished writing my undergraduate essay, and Professor Campbell was my supervisor in IFE many years back. So I submitted this, that time we're using typewriter. So I submitted this essay and I dropped it on his table. He looked at it and he started reading some words from it. And then he identified, said, what language was this? I mean, partly I had done interview at Moyo with some shrine painters, and there were a lot of Yoruba words, Oriki and so on and so forth. At that time, I had no knowledge of how to put tonal marks on Yoruba words. I mean, I grew up speaking English from home, struggled to speak Yoruba. But that actually kicked me into trying to know more about this. And even at that, for many years now, I still can't really say that I have known. But that kicked in something in me. When he asked, are these Yoruba? This is not Yoruba. He told me this is not the Yoruba that he is familiar with. So I then had to go back and ask a Yoruba student to first teach me the do-re-mi of the Yoruba, and then sat down with my rapidography pen to put marks on those words. And I mean, actually that kicked in my interest in learning more about the Yoruba. So that has now put me instead to try to, what Professor Okediji was talking about, talking about our ideas, thinking about things. So he's thought about some of the things that he thinks about Wewe's work. Now he has put that in the book. And the most unfortunate thing, like he has said, is that now what he has done now has opened up barrels of questions for us to start debating, creating more work like the Yoruba proverbs that have been mentioned. But maybe directly to my question now, on page 51 of the book, where Professor Okediji was mentioning something about, crisscrossing Modakeke Ile-Ife War and where we're moving from Ondo, taking his paintings to Lagos. And he gets to a place, said, until Ogun induces discord. Oh, that got me thinking. And my question was that, okay, of division and fragmentation caused by Ogun, which I think his activity in inducing that discourse is now similar to that of issue. The question I want to ask is that, does Tola Wewe, in your opinion, also induce these similar traits, since Ogun is like his patron saint, as Professor Wale Shoyinka? Thank you. That's just a question I want to ask now.
Well, you know that he lives in Ondo, the headquarters of Ogun celebration. Tola Wewe, I've seen him paint 1,000,000 times. He doesn't start with drawings the way Picasso probably would start with drawings, like several drawings in many instances. Tola Wewe has the drawings in his head, and he paints just like he is eating or is drinking or is talking with you. The material just comes out. He does not question it. He does not correct it. It is just part of, just like someone sweating or someone going to the bathroom. He just let it flow out. So in that sense, I think of him and his work within that energy of Ogun that is impulsive. Ogun that goes into this arena and sees people who are sitting down and they are having a festival of not talking. There's this festival in which people are not talking, and Ogun gets there and he talks to them, and they are not talking to him because they're in a festival of silence. And what did Ogun do? He drew his cutlass, or he drew his sword, and went impulsively into action. the way Tola Wewe would draw his brush. Actually, most of the time, he doesn't even use the brush. That's fascinating. He doesn't use the brush. He uses the palette knife. And until you see him paint with a palette knife, you wouldn't understand how he's able to make his textures. The photograph does not do justice to Wewe's paintings. It's when you actually see it that you'll understand that it's uneven, it's variegated, the surfaces are undulating, and that sense of the spontaneous intervention, that sense in which he wakes up in the middle of the night and just goes into the canvas and says, I'm going to do 10 paintings today. And he does 21. That's the way I see Tola Wewe in terms of the Ogun intervention in him.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Janine?
Can I just do a quick question before?
Okay, go ahead, Frida.
May I please, because I know she's going to wrap it up. I just wanted to ask about, thinking about his remark, as an artist, I am the new town crier. You know, it kind of reminds me like, and all of this revolutionary action, you know, that's going on. It kind of really takes me back to being in Wanwu, you know, and as being the person who said, hey, we are here. We are modern. We are not just mask and sculpture, although mask and sculpture is beautiful, but we are here in the modern world. And so one of the things we that tends to get overlooked is the fight that he had, you know, and that he had here in America, you know, at a time when Black people couldn't even go into parks, couldn't go into museums, you know. So he became a part of that narrative as well. And so I think Tola Wewe was born in 1959, right? That's the same year that Benin Wanwu's Queen Elizabeth II was unveiled in front of, you know, the House of Representatives, you know. So we're thinking about a different era, a total different era, and I see them both as revolutionary figures. And this whole thing about negritude and what all of the complexities of that, I think we often forget the narrative that dignity in Wanwu, some people call him arrogant. Some people really looked up to him. In many ways, he had praises. Okeke had a different story, but dignity is what he brought to all of us, you know. And when he showed his work in 49 or 47, Ebony Magazine, you know, Chicago Defender took pride. This was like us at a time when we couldn't even show. When Elizabeth Catlett had to have her kids on a bus, you know, bus through the park to get into a museum. So this is a long way from Towe, but in some way I see some parallels here, very different eras in terms of breaking new ground, of saying we are here in very different ways. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I totally enjoy the comparison that you are making. The way in which Tola Wewe was able to say, I'm here, was in a slightly different way because he was operating within Nigeria. I had the opportunity to have been taught by Ben Enwowu when he was a professor at Ife. And he was always dressed in a jacket with a tie and polished, shiny shoes with knockers. Every time.
Of course.
And
yes,
we are here in a new way. When you will never find Tola Wewe dressed like that.
no, no.
Because he's bringing dignity to a different way of thinking. And when he started in Lagos, all of the collectors didn't want his work. And it's very interesting that in Tola Wewe, and that was the Nigerian collector. When the expatriates living in Lagos were collecting his work, were buying his work, they said his work was too primitive. That's what those Nigerians were saying, Nigerian collectors. And later on, when they now saw the way this work was selling like hotcakes, that was when they got interested. And so we can see almost a 360-degree kind of relationship between Benewowu and Tola Wewe. But
Yeah.
broke the ceiling.
Products of two different generations. One dealing with neo-colonial society, and the other responding to the imposition of a colonial inferiority complex. So let's move on to Janine, and we'll wrap this up as the last comment from our panelists today. Janine.
Thank you.
Because we're going to wrap this up in about 4 minutes, so you have the last word, more or less.
One then quick comment and one final question for you that maybe you can just touch on briefly. First of all, I wanted just to say that I have respect for your comments on locating a publisher and your decision to move forward with a Nigerian-based publisher. I have concerns with the lack of circulation of publications. It's incredibly difficult. The restrictions in publication aside, the review process, the peer review process that you talked about in the United States aside, there are wonderful publications that fail to reach Nigeria. When I was there when I was in Nigeria in was it March, I hadn't been in several years, and I returned with a suitcase full of publications, wonderful publications that aren't available in the United States. So I hope we continue to have this conversation about how we can circulate this knowledge. And then for my question, I just wanted to step back. I've been thinking a lot about about expectations for research. I was talking to a colleague recently who I had been encouraging to work on, and was reluctant because she felt this need to maintain some distance. There's still this idea that we're supposed to maintain distance from our subjects, that we might introduce bias if we have too close of a connection to our topics. And I'm thinking about that as being somewhat of a colonial legacy. And you don't seem to be hampered by this notion. So I'm just hoping that you can talk just briefly a little bit about your thoughts on that and how you perceive yourself as a research and approach that research.
Let me quickly interject and remind Professor Okediji we have 2 minutes left.
Well, to put it in a short form, I do not respect a lot of the intellectual walls that academia tries to put up. I see my work as a responsibility to actually break down those walls in order to see possibilities of raising an African intervention into academia that does not respect Western impositions.
Okay, that will be the last word. I want to thank all our panelists. I've thoroughly enjoyed, your presentations and, the back and forth interactions with the author. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Tola Wewe to be a part of this panel. You know, it would have been so delightful to listen to him, to hear all these commentaries about, you know, on his life and his work and his place in contemporary arts in Nigeria. Again, thank you so much to all of you, and also thank you to our host for organizing such a fascinating forum and giving us the opportunity to voice, you know, our opinion. And I hope this will probably be the beginning of further conversation, further discussion on Okediji.'s fascinating book on Tola Wewe. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Bye, Prof.
See you too, Professor.
Bye. Yeah.